What's going on, guys? Welcome to the David F. Haas podcast. I'm here with my good buddy, Mickey Pittman. We already did a part one of this, and now we've teamed up and we decided that we're going to do a 3-part series on leadership. Mickey, thanks for being on again.
Absolutely.
Love having you, man. And in the first part, we kind of gave a little bit about Mickey's background. He's an Army Ranger, former Army Ranger, and he spent a lot of time in the corporate world. And him and I just got hooked up, like just on a whim. We're in a similar group together, and he happened to reach out to me. And because of that, we realized that we have stumbled upon like something that is like really interesting, I think, in the leadership world, and something that, from what I can see, what I've read about is completely missing, right? And that is this two parts of leadership. And we've kind of combined to create this thing called like the letting go leader, where in order to become a great leader, you first need to look within and heal from what's going on within and remove the blocks that are preventing you from living your best life. And until you do that, all the leadership tactics and strategies that you learn are going to be somewhat useless, because you haven't got through what it is that you need to get through in order to be a successful leader. It's like Gandhi was like the guy that said, "Be the change you want to see in the world," right? And so this is exactly the way I feel about leadership and leadership strategy, is that you need to become who you want your employees to become if you want them to kind of like follow. So if you're someone that's suffering from self-doubt or lack of confidence, or you're angry, or you're completely desire driven and you're only looking out for yourself, you're going to really struggle as a leader, right? And I don't really hear a lot of people talking about this in leadership. It's like most of the leadership that I've heard up until this point is really a lot about like the tactics of how you can become a better leader. And I think that is like insanely important, because meeting you, Mickey, was like one of the things that kind of like opened my door. Like I was like, I was leaning towards this idea that I need to really become a better leader. If I want to be in charge of everything, I have to learn how to be in charge of nothing. Like that was like a quote that I heard that really sat with me. And then all of a sudden I meet you, and like you're this guy that has all these great leadership strategies. And it was just like this perfect mix. So why don't you give like a little bit, again, a brief little history of what it is that you've kind of done, Mickey, and then let's just talk a little bit about kind of this dynamic that we've created between like the monk. We call it the monk and the warrior. This is my buddy Tony and I talk with this. I'm the monk and he's the warrior, but it's kind of similar to what we got going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea of being a warrior monk. I think it's fantastic. So my background, all I ever wanted to be was a airborne ranger, what some people call an Army Ranger. And to me, growing up, that meant serving in the Army. I became an infantry officer, and I went to something called the U.S. Army Ranger School, and it's supposedly the world's greatest leadership school. It's one of the hardest, I can tell you that. I mean, I entered at 195 pounds, and I left 8 weeks later at 145 pounds, right? So it's a 50-pound difference in my life, right? And so it's just a place where they teach you principles, and then you don't have to put them on paper. You got to put them in application. So whether it be in an old school desert setting for some of the guys way back when, or it'd be in a jungle setting or mountain setting, you have to prove that you can lead people effectively, right? And one of the things that I think you and I have discovered, and we both really adhere to this and believe in this, is that there's absolutely a spiritual concept to leadership, and I think that's powerful. And I think for so many people, they're carrying around a lot of baggage. And I saw in Ranger School, I saw guys that could not let go of things back home or in between the years, and it brought them to their knees. They weren't able to complete the mission because of the struggles that they went through. And had a parachuting accident. I had a couple. I tried to navigate them, hide them. I was at a point in the hospital in the Army after a jump, and I was messed up, and the doctors sent me there, and I realized, hey, if I get thoroughly checked out, I'm going to find out that I'm not going to be able to be in the same unit I was in. And so back in the day, it's pre-digital, so I asked the nurse if I could see my documents, and she said yeah. And so I just grabbed them and hobbled on out of there because my desire was to be a part of something special, right? And it reached a point after my second injury where I really couldn't do that anymore. And, God opened the door for me to go to Wall Street and teach leadership. I had been rated as one of the most effective leaders out of our top units, FORSCOM, JSOC, USASOC. It means something military people, doesn't mean anything to anyone else. But I put a lot of time in understanding how to lead effectively and had some great mentors. And, I would say that probably what we're trying to do is to do this for others what someone else has done for us, right? I mean, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and doors have been opened for us, and it's just a lot that I've learned as you have along the way that really helps people. So after Wall Street, I went and got back into the military realm and built training programs with one of my mentors for special operations forces, and really can't talk about that on Zoom, but I spent many years doing that. And then I became a restaurateur, and started a gym, started a CrossFit box, and now have several businesses that I'm partnered with or run. And so I love leadership because leadership is what everything rises and falls on, right? But I think what you and I've noticed is that there's a lot of people out there who are stuck in their leadership ability because they've got so much going on between the ears that they can't get it together, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's like, you can hire the best leadership coaches in the world, but if they're not addressing what is going on between the ears, then it's going to be kind of money wasted. Really, it is. And I know that you've already done a lot of that work. I mean, you just look at the amount of books behind you, and you're dedicated to learning like I am. So naturally, from doing all that, you get some of that. And I think what Mickey and I realized really quickly together was like, hey man, like there's something here. There we have something, and we literally you believe in like a divine intervention or divine guidance or whatever it may be. It's like out of a group of 400 or 500 people, like Mickey happens to reach out to me, and then we ended up booking our first client together, which is yet to start, but it's going to start soon. And then we're like, man, there is something here. Like this is something that's really missing in leadership. So let's just talk about a little bit of that, of my side of that, and then we'll move into some actual like leadership strategies. Because the way it worked for me was when Mickey came into my life, it was at this really strange point where I was expanding into this new business, and I really recognized that I had been the person up until this point that was doing everything. Like if I couldn't get my staff to do it, I would just do it, right? And that in itself, that awareness that I had was a huge limiting behavior. So like one of the things that we talk about in our leadership training is about becoming aware of what is limiting you. So one of the things that was limiting me was potentially my lack of humility, right? Meaning I thought I was the best person to do everything. And I'm sure that you see that with a lot of leaders, that they want to take on the role and do everything.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of leaders out there, and it unbelievably is a destructive behavior. Is that there's this idea of Jim Collins in Good to Great, which is a fantastic leadership book if you haven't read it, coined this idea of the genius with 1,000 idiots. And he noticed that there was people that really sharp people. You'll notice sometimes it's the smartest people, right? So I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to be surrounded by smart people. But some people just have a hard time letting go, literally, right? And we saw this in the military, and you wouldn't make it, right? I mean, guys who could not, we call it by, with, and through. If you're not able to let go and actually work by people, with people, and through people, you're just not going to be anything significant or do anything strategic. And it really doesn't matter where you come from. It's just a truth. And when you sort of grab hold of control, what you're telling people is you don't trust them. And I don't know about you, but this world's a little bit crazy. And people, especially in the United States, and I think it's true all over North America, people don't have to work for people they don't want to anymore. And it's a significant change that's occurring. I mean, if you look at the Wall Street Journal all week, I mean, they're talking about the millions of people who've just checked out. They're calling it the Great Resignation. And one of the challenges I think that we're trying to address is the fact that there's a lot of leaders that are kind of locked up in their own stuff. I mean, they're kind of broken between the ears, and because they're holding on to so much stuff, it's really coming out of them all over the place. And they're toxic leaders. And as a result, people are leaving their workplaces. I deal with this all the time with people, coaching, counseling, consulting, and they're like, "Well, I don't understand it. Everyone's quitting, or I've had to fire everyone." And I often remind them that if what's the one thing that's the constant in this scenario, right? It's you as a leader. And so it's when we actually look inward and deal with that stuff that's inside that allows us to become an effective leader, I think, long term. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. Like you just like were hitting the nail on the head with so many things. It's like, for me, it was this awareness that I had that I needed to let go of control, right? And so when I'm getting ready to let go of control, I'm similar to Mickey, that I'm a restaurateur, and I've owned a bar restaurant for over 22 years, and I was forever like the mom and pop leader, like meaning I just did whatever I had to do. If I had to clean the toilets, I cleaned the toilets. If I had to bartend, I bartended, and I just did it all, which, is a really effective strategy if you want to remain a mom and pop, right? But if you ever want to grow your company beyond, I would even say 20, 30 employees, you need to learn to let go of control. So as I started become aware of this, and I think awareness is the first milestone that most people need to get over, right? And what is awareness? Essentially is learning to pay attention to what is going on in between your ears, right? Like what's happening in your thoughts. And so as I became aware that, I actually really don't trust my employees, right? That was the truth behind it. Like, I don't think they can do it as good as I can do it. And maybe there is this element of truth to that. But in my mind, I talk a lot about these things called survival patterns, and we can get into this a little bit more, but one of my survival patterns was not letting go of that control, because I thought if I did let go of control, I was going to end up poor. Like that was at the root fear of that. Right. So then as I did the work to learn how to transcend the fear of poverty, and like, there's like basically, the three basic fears, which is the fear of death, fear of illness, and fear of poverty. Right. Like this is what Buddha found out when he like left the palace. He, like if you don't know the story of Buddha, but essentially he was like this prince that was trapped not trapped, but like he was kept apart from the real world and just lived in this fantasy land and in behind the palace walls. And then one day he went out into the world and he saw a sick person. He immediately developed the fear of sickness or illness. And then he saw a poor person and he immediately developed the fear of poverty. And then he saw a dead person and he immediately developed the fear of death. And so everything from that point forward was to learn how to unprogram from those fears, right? So because of this work that I've done and the awareness that I've had over time, I recognize that tied to my holding on to the reins so tightly was at the core of this thing was the fear of poverty, right? And so the way I transcended that fear was I started to connect to where that fear began in my life, right? And I've talked in depth about some of these incidences, but essentially, I grew up. My mom died when I was 9 years old, and my dad was kind of left to take care of me and my brother. And while my dad was a great guy and he did provide, we weren't poor by any means. I think my dad made like 80, 90K a year. He made it good, but he just never took care of any of his stuff. Like he didn't care about what kind of cars he drove. And now looking back, I kind of like think that's kind of funny, because like, that's ultimately the life you want to live, is like a life where you don't give a shit about what other people think, right? But anyways, but to me as a kid, like driving around in an old Ford Tempo with 2 spare tires on the back, and had a purple fender and a red hood, on a black car. That was like the most embarrassing shit of my life, right? And so at the core of my fear of poverty was the shame that I felt from like not driving the nice cars, not having the nicest house. And so that drove my desire to be successful, which I'm grateful for in some ways, because it led me to where I'm at today. But recognizing that not letting go of those reins and that control was connected to the fear. So then how did I go? Well, how did I let go of it? Well, I just learned how to let go through the process of feeling my emotions, right? And actually, this is actually a story here that is close to you, Mickey. I was up in someplace in Florida called Waikiki River or something. Do you know the name of that river? I can't think of the name.
Yeah. Wikawachi, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, that's it. I can never pronounce it. But so anyways, I go in this river and you paddle up and there's like manatees. It's like freshwater, beautiful place. And so close to where Mickey lives. And At this one spot, you can park your kayaks and you can climb up this like tree ladder and go to this platform and dive into like this pool area where like the river kind of bends and there's a big hole that's really deep. So as I started climbing the ladder, immediately the fear of like falling started coming to me, right? And because of the work that I've done, I recognize I can move through the fear by just staying with it, right? So I had two choices. I could retreat from the fear, right? Which is what I was doing my whole life with respect to leadership. I was just not giving anybody any power. So I was retreating from the fear of poverty. Or I could stay on the ladder and I could stay with the fear until it was gone, right? And that's essentially what I did. I just sat there and there was all these people standing around watching me. And I'm sitting on the ladder like halfway up, like, I'm like, just give me a minute. And I just sat there and I breathed through the feeling and I noticed how it felt in the body, the shaky knees. And I stayed there. And then after a minute, that fear no longer had power over me. And I was able to climb to the top of the ladder and jump off, right? That's essentially the same process I had to go through with this fear of poverty. Once I recognized that I wasn't loosening the reins out of fear of poverty, I just had to sit with those feelings. I had to go back to the feeling as a kid, feel those emotions, do that same process. And then I was free. And then I came to this point in my life where I was like, I'm never going to be poor. Never. Like I believe that at my core, right? And it's not something I'm just saying consciously and subconsciously. I still believe I'm going to be poor. Like I really, truly believe that it doesn't matter if the world collapses, I'm going to be fine. Like in the Great Depression, there was people that had no jobs and there was people that had 3 jobs, right? And it's because it's like, I just have a willingness and a work ethic that I know that I'm going to be okay. So once I kind of combined all of that knowledge, and none of that would have been possible without awareness, right? Once I combined all of that knowledge, I let go of the reins, right? I stepped completely back. And because of that, I was able to start my coaching business. And because of that, I was able to open up my new retreat. And it just opened up the door for me to do so much more and also opened up the door for me to discover my true purpose, which was helping people in coaching, right? And without that awareness, all right, without letting go of those reins, that never would have happened. Now, where I could have benefited was having a guy like you, Mickey, after I realized I had to let go of those reins. Now, because what I did, I just let go of the reins, right? I just said, yeah, go ahead, manager, run the show, right? But no guidance, no nothing. And, you know, there's a little bit of guilt that I feel about not leading him properly. So that's something else I would have to learn how to let go of. So I don't, because now that guilt, now this is like kind of like the work I do. Now that guilt could block me or prevent me from being a better leader for my next manager, because now I'm like, I might overcompensate because I don't want to feel like he's not supported, right? So like, you know, so what would your advice been to me there, Mickey, if I would have, you know, after I made this amazing awareness and like, this is what we're talking about. This is our leadership program. You have to have this awareness in order to bring a guy like Mickey in to like really help you. So after I made the awareness, I let go of the reins. What was the next step for me? Like, what did I miss?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of interesting things there, and you know, probably one of the things we want to let people know is that really kind of no matter your background, right? No matter where you come from, that this idea of letting go is central across the realm. I mean, if you look at what Paul says, you know, Paul said to hey, you're going to run a race, and in that race, you better drop everything that entangles you so that you can win, right? And I think there's so many people just locked up. There's so much stuff, and I think it's a really powerful story what you were telling about your childhood. And I think, you know, what's interesting is that we go between 2 extremes in our lives, right? And too much of a good thing is bad. You know, I've seen that across the board. So the fact that you had a little bit of man, I want to do better. I want to achieve. There was something in you from your childhood that said, hey, not me. I'm going to achieve X, Y, or Z. You know, that can be healthy, right? It can be good to have a goal and a place you're going to get to. But what you saw, and this is what we see so much in life, and this is where coaching comes in, is that it almost went too far, right? And so you taking reins meant I'm going to take the reins and never let go, right? And so what, you know, it's the old Marshall Goldsmith, you know, what got you here won't get you there, right? And so really, I think what we're trying to tell people is that the journey begins with yourself, right? You've got to have some really hard conversations with yourself and be willing to admit, and this is a really powerful thing, be willing to admit that the biggest thing holding you back is yourself,
Yeah.
right? And if you're not willing to do the internal work, if you're not willing to look between the ears and maybe have some hard conversations with yourself about what are your actual beliefs. You and I talked about this just before we started this idea that that you got to discover truth. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing in my life is I just want to know truth. And the old adage is, the truth will set you free. And for some people, they need to realize, hey, I'm micromanaging my way through life. And it's because of my childhood, right? It's because of some things that happened along the way. And I see that so often, right? And it actually really helps. When uh, I heard a psychologist say one time that we are, even as adults, who we were between the ages of 8 and 12. And
Yeah. Yeah.
such a powerful idea. But if you think about it, you can almost ask someone. I love to do this one. Tell me your story. Tell me about your childhood, right? And you're going to learn so much about that person, in that context. And so the key is, you're absolutely right. As a leader, right? You taking ownership, making sure things were good. If you're starting a restaurant, you're doing everything. You're making sure everything's just perfect. And then you realize, right? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 2 years, that you're burning yourself out because you're doing everything. And restaurants will consume you. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I mean, I think, restaurants is one of the businesses that most people want to get in, but it's also one of the most difficult businesses to be successful, and, my drive and desire was a testament to why I'm the oldest bar in downtown Windsor, Ontario here. So,
Right.
but it also, was the biggest thing that limited me from growth. And I actually tried, this interesting story is that I actually tried to grow, before I made this awareness. I tried to expand. I opened up actually 2 other bars and restaurants right downtown Windsor, all in the same area. And immediately I realized I was a one-man show. Like what made me successful at my bar Treehouse, I couldn't duplicate it in other areas because the only thing that hinged on that success was me, right? And so, luckily, one business I had to close, and the other business I sold and recouped a little bit of money. But then I got completely 100% refocused on Treehouse, and then from that point forward, every year for 7 years, we increased our sales by 30%, right? And so, but I still hadn't learned my lesson at that point yet, though, right? All I learned was that I have to be there in order to be successful. So then that also created a new program in me that, once again, it's like, I am the critical factor of this place's success because I'm here, right? But with the awareness of letting go of the fear of poverty, letting go of control, then I could say, okay, wait, I can be a critical part of this success and manage from afar, but I still didn't do a great job of it, right? I still didn't lead my manager properly, So, and that's where I want to kind of circle back, and because
Oh, I see.
it's like, yeah. So it's like, what was it that I missed, there, Mickey, when I made this awareness, because of all the spiritual work that I'd done and the inner work that I had done, actually my story is like aligned with, I think, with what every leader struggles with. Is like, first you have to uncover why you're doing the things you're doing. And once you do, and you learn how to transcend them, then you need the tools and tactics. And this is what I missed. After I made this discovery, 5 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm missing this leadership element. It's like, why am I not leading this guy properly, right? And so, like, what would have been the advice you would have given me, after making that discovery?
Well, the first thing you have to understand, you have to define leadership. And I think a lot of people talk about leadership, and I picked up a book the other day about leadership, and I went 5 or 6 pages in, and the guy never even defined what he was talking about. He just kept calling it leadership. And you realize that in this world, it's just like spirituality, you say that, and we could mean 1,000 different things, right? And so you have to define leadership. The best definition of leadership that I've seen or come up with is the military definition. And is people say, well, you talk a lot about the military and your experiences there, and why is that so special? And I like to tell people it's not so special. It's just that the military, the price of failure is death, right? And so it's not, oh, I'm going to lose my job, or I may not have my business in a year. It's I might not be here tomorrow. And so because of that, it just happens to sharpen the focus a little bit, right? Just like that moment when you were standing on that ledge, dealing with the fear of heights, right? I mean, that brings things into focus. Would you agree? And so the military is just really good because life and death are so present at kind of bringing things into focus. We would say that leadership is influence, and it's specifically influencing others to accomplish a mission, task, or purpose. And so you're not a leader if you're not working through others. And that was just a huge revelation. I mean, you could be a boss, you could be a manager, you could even be a business owner, but you're not a leader. And so it's the difference between, really having to be in your restaurant 24/7, 365, and being able to go away on vacation and not worry about it because you know what's going to happen. And so we talk about building trust, and you build trust. We have an acronym. It's called it takes sweat, and sweat is skill, will, experience, attitude, and trust. And those are really the 5 components of really kind of building a high performance team. You have to influence others in order to get them to work for you. I would often tell people, they're like, yeah, I can't trust anyone I've hired. And I say, okay, well, tell me about the person who's doing your hiring, right? And when it comes to a small business, they're like, well, I do the hiring. I'm like, so what you're really saying is you're unable at this time to attract the kind of people that you need in order to be able to step away and see your restaurant run effectively, your business run effectively when you're not there. So again, you're complaining about your people, but this is an opportunity for you to take ownership and say, okay, I need to improve something about myself in order to attract the right kind of talent. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I would add in there is like, that lack of trust is like, if you what you hold in mind tends to manifest. So if you don't trust people because you're worried about getting hurt or worried about getting screwed over or whatever it may be, then you're going to attract those people into your business, into your life, right? So it's like the angry person keeps on finding situations that make him more angry, right? So the person that's the victim of the world and is constantly blaming everyone else is going to continue to attract situations where they blame others. And man, that's where I was trapped for so long, in that blame. And I remember there was a moment in my life, and this was another like critical awareness that I had, was that I was in this is 12, 13 years ago. I was like $350,000 in debt. I had multiple businesses. They were all failing because I was trying to spread myself out and it wasn't working. And I wasn't leading anybody. I was trying to do it all, right? And I was in this place where I was like, I need to sell or get out of this partnership that I was in. And I was still in this blame mode. I was blaming my business partners. I was blaming my employees. I was blaming people for not stepping up. I was blaming the economy. I was blaming the government. Like I was blaming everybody. And then I just had this moment of this like awareness was like, I need to take full responsibility for everything here, right? It's like, there's only one person that got me in this situation, and it's me. And while it was it was like emotional, it was like, because it was like, holy fuck, like this was all on me, it was like this weight, but at the same time, it was like the most empowering thing that ever happened to me, because I'm like, if I was the reason, then I'm the reason that I can get out of this. And if I take full responsibility, then no one has power over my own happiness or success anymore, right? And so it was harsh, but at the same time, it was the most empowering thing. And right there in that moment, I'm like, I'm out of this partnership, I'm selling this business. And I just went forward and made all of those steps. And from that point forward, there was never an ounce of blame that ever got passed ever again, right? And like, this is one thing I always told my manager. I said, if you have bad employees, it's just a result of bad management, right? And so even though I said that to him, it was like, I wasn't doing it for him in my own eyes, right? I wasn't leading him the way I needed to lead him. But, and this is why, the work that I've done with you has like really opened the door here for me to like be like, okay, now I need to understand how to actually effectively lead these people to get what it is done that I want to get done.
Right. And I think one of the things that we can address, a lot of people are missing in this world today. One is there's no really effective training, and people, especially at the leadership level. And sure, you might be trained on a specific simple task, but that's not really what separates winners from losers in business. And so if you look at the research in North America, you can take the highest, most technical engineering job in the world, right? Maybe it's at SpaceX, or maybe it's, at Boeing, or it doesn't really matter. It could be at an engineering company down the road that does manufacturing equipment. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. That person signs up to be an engineer. All they want to do is build things. That person whose job is technically doing something that's just so specific and requires so much training just to get in the door, still, they only spend 35% to 40% of their time actually doing engineering. And even the most technical fields, 60% of their time is dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people, can we agree that you're dealing with obstacles, you're dealing with challenges, and you're dealing with, oftentimes, as Peter Drucker said, underperformance, right? Because a lot of people, to your point, are so locked up in themselves. They come to work broken, and they're not really excited, empowered, encouraged, equipped to understand that by taking responsibility, there's some powerful things that can happen in your life.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's the other thing that goes along with what it is that we do together is that, by me making the discoveries that I made within, it's like I just naturally raised people up around me. Like, even though I didn't have the skills and the tactics to effectively be an effective leader, I was still very well respected from my staff and whatever else, because they just saw who I was. And I think this is where we'll leave this podcast is I think what is so unique about what you and I are doing, Mickey, is that at the core of this unique combination that we've kind of just stumbled upon is that our intention is to help people, right from the get-go. And you said it to me best. It was like, I'm putting, I'll let you say it, but once you hear what I say, but as you said, at some point in my life, I just made this discovery that if I just really show up and help people, then good things are going to happen. I'm paraphrasing for what you said, but I was like, yeah, I was like, when you focus on just giving and you don't worry about getting, like, that was a big shift for me. It's like when I focus on giving back to my customers, giving back to my employees, now giving to my coaching clients, everything just works out. The money works out. The people come into your life that you need to come into your life to help you advance. It all just happens. And I think you and I actually don't even think I know you and I are aligned on that same point, because for me, with the work I've done, I wouldn't even align with someone that was just obsessed with getting. I want to be aligned with someone that really wants to make a difference and really wants to help. And I mean, that's at the core of like what we're doing here together with this creation of this program, right? So, yeah, man, I don't know. You want to add anything else in there?
No, it actually goes to a leadership point, right? And so how do you earn, right, the right to lead people? And then how do you get people to follow you? That's really at the essence of your struggle as a restaurateur, business owner. You're like, if I leave this place, things aren't going to happen, right? So at the core of it, it's like, how do I trust people? And what I've discovered is that when you serve people effectively, you earn the right to speak into their life. And you also earn the kind of authentic loyalty, right, that matters. And one of my old commanders became vice chief of staff of the Army. He's a senior executive at one of the Fortune 100 firm right now, really, really sharp. And he has some great things to say about how you deal with trust and how you serve people and what that looks like. And when we jump into this idea of influence, right, which is that key part of leadership, you get there by serving others. And when I was starting the business, probably about 15 years ago, I had a mentor. I mean, he's 10 or 15 years older than I am, very successful. This guy's a multi-millionaire. And you look at him, if you saw his home, like, go back to what you were talking about earlier, if you saw his home, this home's probably worth $10 million, maybe $15 million on a beautiful lake in Orlando. If you saw the cars he drove, if you saw the clothes his family wore, the trips he'd take, you'd like, that son of a gun is probably one of those evil people that we see on, HBO Succession or, these other shows are out there. They're just, and it's exactly opposite. He sat me down and said, hey, a lot of people know I'm successful. They don't know how I'm successful. And I said, well, please tell me. He goes, when I first started, someone came to me, a mentor, and said, in order to earn influence in this town, you've got to serve others. And he goes, I spent the first 6 months to a year doing that, serving others, giving away what I did for free, authentically. And in return, by doing that, I earned the right to have a seat at the table in this business community. It's just a powerful idea.
Yeah, and so much as you're telling us, there's so much of that comes up for me too. Is like, a big thing that I had to overcome is like people pleasing and just wanting to make everybody happy. But
Sure.
There was a recognition in me that people pleasing led me to like not having the respect of anybody, right? Because I was never actually serving anyone by people pleasing, right?
Mhm.
It's like
That's right.
if an employee is doing something wrong, and I don't call them out for that with love and respect, like not to yell at their face or whatever, but just be like, hey, this is what I'm noticing.
Right.
And that, my goal is to help you be the best version of yourself. By me not saying that to them, it's not helping them in any way. Right. And so, without the skills and the tactics, just by discovering that and letting go and dropping that people pleasing, it made me a better leader. So, the service seems pretty simple, and it is. I don't want to overcomplicate it, but you do have to watch like the underlying. You can't bullshit the universe. Essentially, is what it comes down to. You can't say, oh, I'm just going to give back so I can get. No. It has to be authentic. It has to be real giving. So
People can smell a rat. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, 100%. People see right through it all, right? So, and that's I think that's what has brought us together, man. And I'm excited to continue this discussion, because there's a bunch of other questions that I want to get into. And one of them being is, I think a lot of people get wrapped up, and we're going to save this for, so don't answer, we're going to save this for part 2, but a lot of people get wrapped up in the cost that their employees cost them. And, one of the things that I noticed is that, like, if I'm paying somebody a salary, I want to make sure I'm squeezing every dollar out of them, right? Every hour that out of them. And there was one thing at one moment I had to be like, listen, I don't have to make sure that I'm making money from them every single second, right? But I think that you can add some tactics in there. We're going to save that discussion for part 2. So thanks for coming on, Mickey, and I'm excited to get going and do part 2.